Hello and welcome to Recovery Weekly, an interactive weekly program used to guide you, the family member of an individual with a substance abuse problem, through the process of recovery. I'm your host, Scott Kaling, joined as always by my co-host, Ian Koch. Ian is a licensed drug and alcohol counselor as well as an internationally certified addiction specialist for Northeast Addiction Consultants. Today on the show we have Karintha Haberstroh. Karintha is a licensed clinical social worker and licensed psychotherapist in the state of Maine, and has been working in the field of social work since 1994. She's also the founder of Penny's Place, an all-female recovery retreat in Portland, Maine. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Now, Karintha, I just wanted to start out by asking, when did you realize you wanted to work directly with people in a therapy setting?
I'm not really sure. I feel like I fell into it with behavioral teenagers a long time ago. And definitely, I think that's when I started to realize, how people perceive themselves was how they behaved. And it took me a little while with that population to realize that they weren't maybe dangerous and out to get everyone, but really hurt from a lot of things that they've been through. I think my experience now working with women in addiction, a lot of the same stuff, behaviors, and a lot of the behaviors are medicating those feelings.
Okay. And I read on your website that you personally have experience with addiction on a number of levels. Would you like to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And I like to talk, all the families that I work with, I like to say that I really do understand this disease from both sides of the fence. So growing up, my family was pretty riddled with my brother's substance abuse problem. He struggled with heroin for years, and we actually lost him in 1994. And then I had my own struggles with alcohol for a while, and recovered from that to some extent, and started taking painkillers for a back problem, and that got out of control for me and looked addictive for a while.
So let me ask you a question. If I just did the math on those numbers right, did you start working in the social work field, then become addicted while you were working in the field? Did I put that together?
No, I don't think so. I think, partying started with me as a teenager, just like, high school fun. I was definitely like a high school rock star. Mm-hmm. And I really think a lot of what went on with my brother, just kind of not feeling great about myself from a pretty young age, was a big part of it. I think if anything at times because I had long periods of being sober throughout my career, and I was able to get through school and get a master's degree and have some pretty, good jobs within the social work field. I usually moved up pretty quickly in whatever I was doing. But there was kind of always this theme of going back to something within myself that I wasn't happy with, that made me medicate.
Wow. And what has that experience with the substance abuse taught you about, that gives you more of a specialized view on the whole issue?
Yeah, I think the girls at the retreat would say that, I don't buy anything that comes at me that's not real or is addictive behavior. So I've got a pretty good BS barometer, I would say. And when I say the BS, it's part of the disease. And I feel like when we're in it, we don't even know that maybe we're manipulating or, how many people we're hurting. So I think there's that piece of it. But I know what it feels like, to dislike myself so much that I can't see all the people around me who love me and want me to do well, and see all the gifts that, I would say for me, God has given me, and being able to bring that to fruition. And that's what I see in the women that I work with, and that's what I see in the families that I work with, they know all the good things about their loved ones, and they can't get to it, and they can't get their loved ones to see it. And I just really understand that. And then I understand what it's like to get those phone calls when somebody's relapsed from growing up with my brother, or the police, or, all the ugly stuff that comes with addiction. I feel like there's maybe nothing I haven't seen or heard. I really would say that. And in my 20 years of being a social worker, dealing with addiction myself, seeing my brother's addiction, and that would go back 30 years with that, there's nothing I haven't really seen or understand where it's coming from.
It's interesting you mentioned, people don't know they're manipulating when they're manipulating, and being able to smell the BS. And it's really the difference between like denial and delusion. Denial, right? I could say all morning long that we're not doing this radio show. I could deny that it's happening, but I really do know that it's happening, so I can pretend that it's not, but I know that it's not. Delusion would be me really believing that, you two, that there's no camera right now, that there's nothing happening. Delusion, I really and truly believe the lie. And that's where I think families, one of the things that we do with Northeast Addiction Consultants is we really help families to see that some of this stuff, like, we can't even take it all serious because some of it's just really funny, the way the addict thinks and the things that the addict does. Because they're living in a complete state of delusion. They don't know what they're doing is wrong or bad. They don't see that it's hurting people. And what we often see is how families, because families don't want to really push, they don't want to set strong boundaries. They want the daughter or son to come back to them. What happens is they actually co-sign away on that delusion, and they help that delusion to prolong itself and actually feed it and nurture it, which doesn't help anyone.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I always like to say that I think families, making, choices that may enable their loved one always comes from fear. I truly believe a lot of times boundaries are crossed for anyone, not even just addicts, out of fear, and one of the things I try to say to the families that I work with is any decisions made from fear or guilt are bad ones. And that's across the board. I mean, I've kind of been saying that as a therapist for years. And it can be really hard to set those boundaries. And just talking about the delusional versus denial, I think that's why so many people with substance abuse problems are diagnosed on a regular basis with mental health problems. When, I start working with them, I can literally tell you with the women that I've worked with, we've gotten every woman off of their meds that has come through our door. Now, granted, we just started in September, but people are coming in over medicated, and that's what Penny's Place is about. We're trying to give, a holistic cure to all of this because everything is so medical model now. And my own experience with addiction, and I have a lot of it, is, this just is not a medical condition. And a psychiatrist and a therapist, they're not going to get me better. I am a therapist. I'm a licensed psychotherapist in Maine. I'm not going to get you better because I'm a therapist. We can work on cognitive behavioral therapy for your trauma and grief, and that's what we do it with. But for me, the only solution, has been the 12 steps. And so, I can do the medical model. I've been trained in the medical model. The medical model does work with issues outside of substance abuse. But it's that whole delusional piece that Ian's talking about that gets people medicated. And I do actually see it way more denial as delusional. I definitely do. I think, yes, when we are in, the throes of it and it's at its worst, it becomes delusional. And I agree with that. And I think, the families get sick with us. Our families get sick with us. They don't know how to handle us.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that addicts have to be working specifically with addicts. I can't, somebody, that has never dealt with these issues just doesn't know what it's like to be me or to be one of the women that I work with, and one of the things too that I want to say about Portland, Maine, hands down, I believe may have one of the best 12-step recovery communities in the country. It's a great city anyway, but we are not just people who are going to meetings, on a regular basis and kind of, trying through a daily hour a day of listening to other people talk. Trying to kind of hold it together. Like, we're actually doing the 12-step work. We're helping people do the 12-step work. Anybody can come to Portland and get help with this. It's pretty amazing. And now what's branching out in Portland, which is, awesome too, is we're starting family programs. So groups for family members are starting. That's a big piece of the program at Penny's Place. We can do everything in our power to help a woman get better over 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. But if the family is not ready to support that when they come out the door, you're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention real quickly that this is an interactive program. So if anyone has any questions for Karintha or Ian, you can feel free to tap into the chat box to the right of the screen. But Karintha, I wanted to get more into the actual dynamic that goes on for women instead of the average, co-ed medical setting with Penny's Place. Is it how exactly does that benefit women? You said with that grief and trauma in their lives.
Yeah, I think my experience with addicts across the board, and people across the board, generally, it doesn't just have to be people with problems with addiction. Is most people have experienced some kind of grief or trauma, who hasn't had somebody close to them that has died, and that's going to bring on significant, grief. I think specific to women, what I've learned, and it really came from, working as a therapist and also sponsoring women for the past 5 years, is that great deal of sexual abuse that has not been reported and will not be reported in most cases, in a co-ed setting. And I got better in a co-ed setting, or I started to get better in a co-ed setting, and that worked for me, but I have not experienced sexual trauma. And one of the things I'd like to say, I absolutely love the Big Book. It's my Bible. If it's not in the Big Book, I don't do it.
Just for families or people who are watching who don't know what the Big Book is, it's the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. Go ahead.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry.
And that's where the 12 steps are laid out and how to do them. But it's still very male dominated. Even the version that was reprinted in 2001 still speaks solely to men in it. And the 12-step world as well can be a little bit male dominated. And these are men that are truly trying to help people and help women. It's not that they're not trying to help women. It was almost all men that helped me, which was amazing. For women, though, that have experienced sexual trauma, there's something very intimidating to share that in a male setting. The other thing is women who have experienced sexual trauma or other types of trauma or have issues with codependency, say like a missing father or missing mother throughout their life that has led to codependency, a co-ed environment is actually probably going to make them more sick. And that's been my experience. So what we're trying to generate at Penny's Place or facilitate at Penny's Place is an environment of all women and creating that intimacy with women that you can be who you are and be liked and it'll be safe. And that's really what we do. Men do not, enter our campus unannounced ever. We have a few men that will come in and speak in our Monday night meeting, but we are all female staff. And, we do trauma and grief work, and it gets pretty deep. And these women are, stuff is coming up within, doing the 12-step work that I promise you, 90% of the stuff would not come up in a co-ed facility.
I got two questions for you. What if Well, one, do you take people who don't necessarily have trauma and grief or don't know that they have some sort of trauma? Maybe they don't, it hasn't surfaced. Do you still take people with that?
Absolutely. I mean, primarily at Penny's Place, we're taking women through the 12 steps.
Yeah.
So, and that's something that we're doing differently too. I mean, a lot of facilities are going to tell you that they're 12-step based so that they talk about the 12 steps, but there's a difference about talking about the 12 steps than actually taking people through the 12 steps. And that's how I was taken through, and it was really effective. We absolutely take people without grief or trauma or don't know it yet. I don't know that we've had anybody now that, once we get into the grief and trauma group, that some pretty significant stuff doesn't come up. And for women or even for men, I mean, I specialize with women, but, trauma can even be, that situation in 7th grade where something happened and all of your friends, made fun of you or stepped away from you. And the messages that you tell yourself, for the rest of your life, because of those incidents, are kind of what, lead to this stuff.
My other question is, what do you do if a woman really wants to come to your program but isn't interested in working the 12 steps?
Well, I mean, we would ask them to come and try it out. If they're not willing to work the program, we can't have them stay.
Yeah.
That's basically it, but we try to ease them in, gently. Usually the first week, people are feeling pretty sick the first week, in general. And what we have is an environment of women getting better. And this is exactly what happened to me. I can remember my cousin referring me to the place that I went to. And she said, you're going to have to do the 12 steps. And I was like, okay. I mean, I was, pretty ready. I was pretty broken. And then she said, you're going to have to find a higher power. And I thought, oh, yeah, so I'm going to skip that piece. I'm pretty smart. I'm going to go skip that piece. But what happened was I went to a place that everybody was really getting well and people that had, terrible addiction problems, I would say way worse than me, were well and married and happy and doing the things, and their cell phone wasn't getting turned off because they weren't paying the bill and, all those things. And so when you create that environment, it's a little bit hard to deny that it works. So we've yet to have a woman come in that hasn't been willing, to do the work, or if they have not been willing. I think we've had 1 or 2 women that went in within the first couple of days. I almost want to say the environment was too well, they couldn't handle it. And I mean, we are just so grounded in wellness and holistic wellness, and safety. We have an intensive meditative yoga program, and we have trauma and grief work, and we have the dogs. We have house dogs that are part of pet therapy, taking care of something besides yourself. And, at any time you see, I mean, the dogs just, take over like the couches and stuff. Like we have to ask them to, please move over when we want to get on the couch. But, they're snuggling up with the dogs, and we rescue dogs therapeutically, the value of dogs that have been abused or abandoned, with women that have experienced trauma is pretty intense, and that's part of our program too. So I think of one of the last women we had come in. She was very resistant. She was just terrified. She was scared of what everybody would think of her. And what really took over is her bonding with one of our dogs during the first week. We have all those little kind of things put in place, and we bring several different types of women in with several different types of experience so that there's somebody that they can relate to at Penny's Place.
Well, and now, as far as you were talking about pet therapy, is that one of the ways that you make them reach a turning point in their recovery? As far as if they're really struggling, and at one point, you make them step outside themselves, and just kind of get over the grief and the trauma by just noticing there's other people in this world. And that, this is the error of my ways, and some in that sense where they're not so self-centered and in their own addictions.
Yeah.
And
that's exactly it. I mean, you come, women that come in, usually a piece of addiction, a very big piece of the illness is entitlement. we start to get very entitled and think the world owes us things, you know.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, yeah, and I could say that Penny's Place is self-pay, and that's because we're taking women through the 12 steps, so insurance doesn't pay for it if we don't medicate them. And so I would say the entitlement level may be a little bit higher at Penny's Place than some other places, but that's part of the piece that comes in. So it's taking care of somebody but besides yourself. And I can remember being in treatment and one of the guys saying to me, like, God, you're so selfish. And I thought, I'm a social worker. Like, I help people, And I can remember a year into my recovery realizing like how selfish I was and how selfish I was with my family. And, we have been on phone blackout for the first 2 weeks that they're in Penny's Place. And one of the reasons we do that is because what we do as addicts in the first 2 weeks in rehab, we get on the phone and call our parents or family and tell them everything that we need to make us comfortable, and what we're trying to do is coaching. Why don't you call your mother or father and ask them how they're doing? And the look on the faces, when we say something that basic. And that it's just all part of the disease. These are good people that would normally do this, but through the disease, it's gotten a lot worse. So the dogs are about getting up in the morning and taking care of somebody besides yourself. And what the reward is in that. And anybody that does the 12 steps, what you learn is how you get better is by helping other people stop thinking about yourself. I mean, at the hardest times in my recovery, over the last 5 years, working with another woman, when I really didn't even feel like showing up because things just felt so hard in my life, going and working with another woman through sponsorship, I just, there's not one time that it doesn't work doing that. So I also, had my cousin in doing an amends to her back in Philadelphia, because Penny's Place is named Penny because Penny's a big part of my recovery story. I rescued Penny and I loved her a lot. And it was getting to the point that I wasn't able to take care of her. And I knew that she could not take being in one more placement. And that's really when I made a phone call and said that I needed help, was with Penny. But I remember my cousin saying to me, I was so happy when you finally got Penny because I thought, well, now she actually has to take care of somebody else. Maybe she'll get it together. And that's actually what happened, which is pretty amazing.
I've actually gone through a similar experience myself where my parents told me, maybe you need a little more responsibility and that will get you off. And of course, at the time, my mind was fogged and I couldn't think clearly, but because I've also had experience with the addiction. And I just remember at one point when I got a job, I went back to school and all these things, and all of a sudden the addiction itself started to lessen, because I was just finally seeing that I was, worth something, first of all, myself, that I had been disguising self-hate the whole time, but it was more the fact that when you become a productive part of society, you once again regain what you've lost so long ago. And I just know that what you're saying is perfectly accurate to what recovery actually is, and I hope people get that message at home to really know that. Go ahead, Ian.
No, I wanted to say, for folks who are watching, the message isn't give your kids who are still using a whole bunch of responsibility necessarily. Okay. However, there is strategically ways to create willingness and to help people, bring an addict to their knees ultimately, so their only option is to get help. And I think that I'm working with a family right now, and they're probably watching, and something really interesting happened where, a lot of what Northeast Addiction Consultants does is we help families generate a level of willingness in their addict or in their loved one, their alcoholic, whatever, which ideally helps that person to seek treatment. It helps to open up the mind to see that there's more out there than just getting high, in a sense, or that getting high might not be an option forever, and what happened is, I helped the family set some boundaries. I helped them to stick to those boundaries. And as soon as that happened, a certain other set of events happened, which was, a friend of this person happened to be getting sober and said, you know what, you can't live like this anymore. And that girl just happened to be open to say, you know what, oh my God, my family has just kicked me out. I can't have a job. I'm doing illegal activity to get money. And now there's somebody else who had the same problem with me, and they're starting to not experience those problems. So maybe getting sober might be an option, or maybe being sober is something even that I don't like, I have to look at, and it's these two ends of the spectrum where you take or people lose things and they don't have anything to hold on to anymore, or the stuff they have to hold on to, they can't because their addiction is so out of control. It's almost like there is no other option. When using is still an option, let's face it, why stop? If there's an unlimited source of money, if there's an unlimited source of comfort, warmth, happiness, like why would we not do that? I always describe that the feeling an addict or an alcoholic gets, all right, is this feeling of ease and comfort. Ease and comfort, for me, the best way I can physically describe ease and comfort is after Thanksgiving dinner when I'm sitting on the couch, right? I'm stuffed. I ate so much turkey that I can't move, and I'm just laying on the couch, almost comatose, half asleep, I'm with my family. That's ease and comfort. That feels good. And the delusion that providers fall victim to, the delusion that family members fall victim to, is that we might say to you, oh, Karintha, oh, Scott, you need to stop using. It's bad. We forget, the families, the providers, we forget that what you're doing feels wonderful. And it feels so good that the consequences that are happening, your current consequences, aren't enough to help you get sober, or you would have. So where you're talking about this extra responsibility is happening and it's causing you to need to get sober, or someone else where they start losing everything and everything that they try to grasp and try to hold starts to disappear from them, there becomes no other option. And I also want to say that families need to get help with that stuff, because I've seen the tough love applied and really hurt the family. I've seen tough love applied, done nothing but drive the addict away. There is a way to do it. There is an appropriate way to do it. You can't just take everything all at once necessarily. There needs to be realistic boundaries set. And what I often find is that the reason the families end up, asking us for help is because they've tried to set boundaries and can't stick to them, or the boundaries they've set haven't worked for whatever reason. So our model really teaches families how to stick to those boundaries by giving them the appropriate education, the things you're talking about. Medicine is a quick fix. Yes, it can help people. Yes, there are specific illnesses that do require medicine, but just giving someone a couple Suboxone doesn't treat heroin addiction, and it never will. It never will.
And I've actually never seen it happen. I challenge people with Suboxone or methadone, and they're good to get people off of opiates in detox. But I challenge people to give me anybody long-term 10 years sobriety from Suboxone or methadone maintenance. And I can tell you, in 5 years of asking that question, I've never gotten an answer.
I actually know a few folks, maybe 3, who've got around 4 or 5 years, give or take, from Suboxone. Now, mind you, they came off of it when they were about 6 months, we'll say 6 months sober. They got off of it. However, right, I'm talking 3, 4 people out of thousands and thousands. You know, the numbers are so small, and what it is it gets into that quick fix, right? Why do that internal work and really fix the problem when you can have a quick fix?
Well, and that's the same situation I'm dealing with like the grief and trauma, you know, and like PTSD. You know, we definitely have women that have suffered PTSD, you know, suffer from PTSD. Medicating the PTSD leaves the PTSD there, you know, and not feeling it in that day. And the moment you take that medicine away, the PTSD is still there. You know, and definitely, you know, in the beginning stages of something like that, you know, it can make sense if somebody's, you know, possibly suicidal or so manic, you know, and certainly there are people, you know, that suffer from bipolar disorder and other chemical imbalances and, you know, meds need to be used and are helpful. So like, you know, using those medications in the beginning and getting into some serious therapy can be really helpful. You know, a lot of times with PTSD, you get severe depression. You know, and are really dealing with serotonin imbalance in the brain. You know, so those kinds of things make sense. But I guess what we're trying to show people is long term, those things don't work. That, you know, it's still going to be there. And just going to something that you had said, Ian, you know, and I talk about this a lot, and sometimes parents think I'm crazy when I say it at first, but I hope it makes more sense, you know, when I explain it. Opiates, in my mind, in some ways, can be one of the best addictions to have. Now, that sounds ridiculous because you have loved ones stealing from you and, you know, doing all kinds of different things. But opiates will take you down quick. And so that piece you were talking about, like there's no other solution because my life has gotten so horrible. And the opiates aren't even helping me anymore. They're just keeping me from not being sick. Where, you know, with alcoholism or even, you know, like cocaine addiction or, you know, other addictions, they can go on forever. You know, people get better and go back and get better and go back. You know, staying off the opiates is almost impossible because you get so physically ill, you know. So one of the beautiful things that I've seen, I know it sounds crazy to use beautiful as a word, is through opiate addictions, you know, 19, 20, 21-year-olds coming into the program and actually getting better. It's like so cool. I always say this about, you know, with Portland, we have a lot of people, you know, from Massachusetts up here. And I like to joke being from Philly, it's because people from Massachusetts are pretty crazy. So are people from Philadelphia. That's a joke, but a lot of my friends really are like, you know, we were pretty crazy in our times. You know, but I get to see these like 19, 20-year-old like kids, like boys from Boston come up here and get into the 12-step work, and they're like on fire and show like other, you know, kids, you know, I say kids because I'm about to be 40, you know, but show other guys that it's cool to be sober. It's cool to do the 12 steps. Like I love that about this. And, you know, we have a lot of women in their young 20s. I've had a 19-year-old at Penny's place, you know, because of opiate addiction. And the fact is other drugs are not bringing people into the program that quickly. The other thing that I've seen, you know, grow out of like, you know, an epidemic opiate situation in this country is parental groups, groups like Learning to Cope in Massachusetts, which, you know, their Thursday night meeting now houses, you know, close to, I think it's in Beverly, Massachusetts, close to 60 or 70 family members. You know, and Al-Anon has been doing the same thing, you know, for a really long time. And people have definitely gotten help in it. But the opiate epidemic is bringing families in, you know, in very large numbers. You know, 4 of the women at Penny's place, parents go to one of those groups in Massachusetts, and it's actually how they found out about Penny's place and got their daughter into treatment. So it's pretty cool.
we're actually going to have her on, I think in July or August. She's going to be coming on. They just started a new group down in Rhode Island. So she's kind of busy, Joanna.
Yep.
The thing too, I think that there is a lot of hope about is that there are a lot of young kids really getting sober, you know, and the groups that are around, there's these pockets of enthusiasm scattered about, and knowing where they are to get to ship people in those directions when they're getting sober is really important, because in a lot of circles, I mean, getting sober is kind of cool, and it's become so popular. You know, it's on TV. It's really everywhere you look. The celebrities are getting sober. Everyone's excited about it, you know, and then to be able to, once someone gets sober, to be able to almost give them an unconditionally accepting group of friends right off the bat and say, you know, make it what you want, is something that, you know, I think a lot of addicts are blessed. You know, but of course, you can't tell them that in the beginning, because that's not what they're interested in. But that's definitely one of the benefits, is the ability, once they get sober, and if you get them in the right program, to be able to have this network of people that they can hang out with, relate to, identify with, you know, and then that's where you see like lasting friendships. Every addict I've ever seen get sober and stay sober, you know, often says, you know, the friends that I had aren't even close to what the friends I have today are.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's been my experience. And it's one of the reasons I love Portland. And it's that, you know, unconditional, you know, friendship, and also like, you know, that relationship. Like, I know what it's like to be you. I think the other thing, you know, I like to say is, and I do feel blessed that I have addictive, you know, behaviors, you know, and I consider myself a recovered addict. But the 12 steps don't just help me. Like, you know, that helps take away that need to use drugs and alcohol right in the beginning, you know, for me. You know, and really it goes with everything. It was like drugs and alcohol went, then the cigarette smoking went. And for me, you know, I had some stuff around food, you know, that started to go. I was medicating kind of however I could. But it is just a way for me every day to get in touch with myself and be okay with myself. And, you know, it's dealt with a lot of other issues, you know, that I have. It doesn't just deal with that, with the substance abuse piece. And one of the things too, in talking about friends, I mean, I have the craziest, most fun group of friends. I mean, we're all crazy. We're all recovered addicts, you know. We've had a lot of fun in our lives. We've taken a lot of risks, you know, but like, you know, we go to a movie theater and like we take over the movie theater. We're having so much fun. Like, we're not doing it on purpose. Or even on Facebook. I mean, like, just I'm hysterically laughing on Facebook every day because 120 of my friends are recovered addicts, and they're hilarious. You know, we really have a good time. I went on a rafting trip about 2 years ago, and it was me in the raft that I was in. It was me and like I think 5 like 20 somethings from Boston were in my raft, but there was like 15 of us on the trip, and I had this woman who had been doing, you know, the rafting trips for 9 years. And as we were going down, she figured out, somebody said something, and she said, "You guys are sober." And we said, "Yeah." And she said, "You were absolutely the funnest group I have ever had in 9 years. Like, we had a lot of fun."
Excellent. Now, Karintha, how can people get in contact with you as far as inquiring about your services?
Well, you can look at our services and see what we're doing at Penny's Place. And I'm the owner of Penny Inc., which is, you know, consulting and therapeutic services for women and families. I can do the outpatient stuff, you know, as well. And Penny's Place is our retreat, which is, you know, a residential, structured residential setting. I'd like to, you know, be clear that we're not a facility, but we are treatment. We're not medical model. We do things holistically. And you can check us out at www.pennysplaceportland.com. And you can also do Penny's Place Portland at AOL.com for email. And also on our website, it's got my personal phone number as well.
Great. Now, Ian, you have any more questions for Karintha?
No, I think we're good.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today, Karintha. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Be sure to tune in next week when we have Thomas Sepulveris, from the owner of 43 Myrtle Street, a sober living facility in Portland, Maine. So there's more Portland goodness. We'll be talking to him about sober living and how to get back on your feet. I just want to wish everyone from Northeast Addiction Consultants a happy Memorial Day and just the best for you and your family. Thank you.